video, we're looking at two nights that ended in unimaginable violence. Nights that began with laughter, music, and everyday moments, but ended with bloodshed and unanswered questions. The first case takes us to Detroit, where three young friends, Paris Cameron, Timothy Blanchard, and Alante Davis, spent the evening in what should have been a safe space. But when a masked gunman stepped through the door, more than 20 shattered the night. By morning, 3 lives were gone, and a community was left asking, how could joy turn to tragedy so fast? Now fast forward to the Bronx. Chicken Don Dada, a 33-year-old rapper and father of 4, had just been seen in a viral fight with another artist. Hours later, he was gunned down outside a smoke shop. The chilling part? The friend standing with him casually walked away seconds before the masked shooter appeared. Was it revenge? Or betrayal from someone he trusted? 2 cities. 2 crimes. Both marked by betrayal, violence, and the haunting truth that safety can disappear in an instant. Let's get into it. Paris Cameron was just 20 years old. She was born and raised in Detroit, and her life was a constant search for belonging. At the age of 13, Paris came out as gay, a decision that required bravery in a city where acceptance wasn't always guaranteed. A few years later, she took another step in her journey, beginning to identify openly as a transgender woman. That shift was not just about how she dressed or the name she chose, but about finally claiming her true identity. Paris was described by friends as bold, energetic, and fearless in the way she carried herself. She loved being around people, feeding off laughter, music, and late-night conversations. Timothy Blanchard, known affectionately as Miami, was also 20. His nickname came from his fun-loving spirit, the kind of personality that reminded people of warm places and good times. Timothy's life was rooted in his family, especially his close bond with his older brother. Friends described him as easy to be around, a young man who balanced work, responsibility, and his desire to enjoy life. Timothy loved parties, music, and being surrounded by people who made him laugh. Alante Davis, at 21, was the oldest of the 3. To his family and friends, he was Tay. Alante was known for being the light in the room, a young man who could make others laugh even when they didn't feel like it. His sister described him as silly and helpful, always willing to lend a hand. He wasn't someone who carried himself with arrogance or bitterness. He loved life and loved people. At his age, he was still finding his direction, but those closest to him believed he had the potential to do something meaningful. Together, Paris, Timothy, and Alante formed part of a tight-knit community of young LGBTQ friends in Detroit. They leaned on each other for support, carving out their own safe spaces in a city that could be harsh and unforgiving. That night, they were simply doing what young people do, celebrating, laughing, creating memories in a house they considered their own. But safety was broken by a chance encounter. Earlier that night, the group had stopped at a BP gas station. Surveillance cameras captured Paris noticing a young man, Devin Robinson. Only 18 at the time, Robinson lived just 2 blocks away. Paris, never shy, started a conversation with him. When the group left, she called out once more, inviting him to the party on Devonshire Road. What seemed like an ordinary, friendly invitation carried more weight than anyone could have realized. Robinson was a teenager grappling with his own hidden struggles. He presented himself as straight but secretly wrestled with his sexuality. Within the LGBTQ community, someone like him was often described as trade, a man who appeared heterosexual but pursued men in private. That label, often joked about in social circles, carried stigma and shame. At the party, jokes and comments were made about Robinson fitting that description. For most in the room, it was lighthearted teasing. For him, it was a wound that cut deep. That fleeting moment at the gas station had brought their lives together. By dawn, the connection between Paris, Timothy, Alante, and Devin Robinson would turn deadly. If you found value in these stories or feel they've given you something to think about, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. Your support makes a real difference and allows us to continue sharing more content like this with you. The night of May 24, 2019, had bled into the early hours of May 25. Inside a house on Devonshire Road on Detroit's east side, a small group of friends lingered after a long evening of drinking, dancing, and laughter. By then, most of the guests had gone home. Only 5 people remained: Blair Keys, Paris Cameron, Timothy Blanchard, Alante Davis, and Armin Matthews. They were tired but still awake, joking about the night's events, surrounded by the clutter of drinks and the mess of an unfinished renovation inside the house. It was supposed to be a safe place, a refuge where they could unwind together. Just before 5 a.m., the mood shifted in an instant. Blair, sitting with the others, heard noises by the front door. At first, it sounded like firecrackers, a sharp popping sound breaking through the quiet. But as the door swung open, reality became clear. A masked man stepped inside, holding a gun. Without a word, he began firing. The chaos was immediate. More than 20 shots echoed through the small house, each one pushing the survivors deeper into terror. Blair sprinted to the bathroom and locked the door, his heart racing as bullets tore through the walls outside. He stayed hidden, counting the shots, certain at any moment the gunman might find him. In the living room, Alante Davis was hit twice. He collapsed where he stood, his life ending almost instantly. Nearby, Timothy Blanchard was struck 4 times. His friend Armin, who had also been shot in the chest, tried desperately to drag him toward safety. They stumbled into the basement, Timothy clinging to life. Armin pressed his hands against Timothy's wounds, begging him to hold on, but his friend's breathing grew weaker until it stopped altogether. Upstairs, Paris Cameron lay gravely wounded. She had been hit multiple times. When first responders arrived, they rushed her to the hospital. For a short time, she remained alive on life support, but her injuries were too severe. Before the day was over, she too was gone. By the time the gunfire stopped, 3 young lives had been stolen, and 2 others were left with physical and emotional scars that would never fade. When Detroit police arrived, the scene was bloody and chaotic. Blair emerged from the bathroom in shock, while Armin, despite his own injury, was still trying to help Timothy. Officers immediately began gathering statements, but one detail stood out. None of the survivors had seen the shooter's face clearly. The man wore a ski mask, leaving only his eyes visible. Still, Blair recalled the shooter's light complexion and brown eyes, details that would later prove critical. Detectives also learned something else that morning. The victims had met a stranger earlier in the night. Blair told investigators about the group's trip to the BP gas station just hours before the shooting. Surveillance footage confirmed it. At around 2:40 a.m., cameras captured Paris Cameron chatting with a young man inside the store. She appeared flirtatious, calling out to him even after he left. As the group piled into their car, Paris leaned out the window and shouted an invitation. They were partying on Devonshire Road. "You should come by." That stranger was later identified as 18-year-old Devon Kareem Robinson, a teenager who lived only 2 blocks away. Through camera footage and witness testimony, detectives began piecing together Robinson's movements. After meeting Paris at the gas station, Robinson walked back toward his home on Buckingham Street. But instead of staying there, he returned to the party. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he had been inside the Devonshire house for about an hour. He spent most of that time upstairs in the master bedroom, engaging in intimate encounters with Paris and others. The atmosphere at the party was lighthearted. Friends made jokes, some teasing Robinson as trade, a slang term for men who appeared straight in public but secretly had relationships with other men. For Paris and her friends, it was playful banter. But for Robinson, the label cut deep. He was still hiding his sexuality from his family and the world, terrified of being exposed. After leaving the party, Robinson was seen again on surveillance cameras around 4 a.m. He returned to the same BP gas station, pacing outside, spitting on the ground, and appearing visibly upset. At one point, he leaned over and gagged. Cameras then showed him purchasing a drink before heading home. By 4:02 a.m., he was back at his house. Less than an hour later, cameras near Devonshire Road captured a dark figure running toward the party house. 4 minutes after the gunshots erupted, the same figure was seen fleeing the scene and heading back in the direction of Robinson's home. Another camera on Buckingham Street showed someone entering Robinson's house at 5:01 a.m., just minutes after the murders. The timeline was seamless. When police arrived at Robinson's home later that day, they discovered he and his mother had abruptly moved out. His roommate told detectives they had left in a hurry without explanation. Images of Robinson were soon released to the public, and the case gained attention across Detroit, especially within the LGBTQ community. For over a week, Robinson remained at large. Then, an anonymous tip led police to a house across the city. On June 5, 2019, Robinson was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to murder, and multiple firearm charges. During questioning, Robinson admitted that he had been with Paris in the bedroom that night, but he denied being with any of the other men. Detectives pressed him, pointing to the surveillance evidence and the survivor accounts. At one point, Robinson confessed he was secretly gay, telling investigators that no one, not even his parents, knew. He said he feared being exposed. Still, he refused to admit to the killings. Detectives suggested he had snapped under pressure, fueled by alcohol and humiliation, but Robinson maintained his denial. Yet the evidence told a different story. DNA linked him to one of the victims, Timothy Blanchard. The video footage placed him near the house at the exact time of the murders. The survivors, though shaken, recalled details that matched his appearance. As prosecutors prepared for trial, the narrative became clear. This was more than a random act of violence. It was a hate-driven crime, fueled by Robinson's internal struggle with his sexuality and his anger at being mocked. In the eyes of investigators, Robinson had left the party humiliated, stewed on his shame, and returned with a gun to silence the people who had witnessed his secret. At trial in March 2020, witnesses including Blair Keys recounted the horror of that night. Blair testified that although he hadn't seen the shooter's full face, he believed Robinson was the gunman. Armin Matthews described dragging Timothy to the basement, holding pressure on his wounds and hearing his last breaths. Jurors also saw the surveillance footage, which mapped Robinson's movements almost minute by minute. The defense tried to argue that the identification was unreliable and that there wasn't enough evidence to conclusively prove Robinson was the shooter. But the combination of eyewitness accounts, DNA, and the damning timeline left little room for doubt. On March 17, 2020, the jury found Devin Robinson guilty on all counts: 3 charges of first-degree premeditated murder, 2 charges of assault with intent to murder, and multiple firearm violations. A few months later, he was sentenced to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole, plus additional years for the assault and firearms charges. The verdict provided justice in the eyes of the victims' families and the community, but it could not erase the loss. Paris, Timothy, and Alante were gone forever, their lives cut short in an act of violence rooted in secrecy, shame, and hate. Survivors like Blair and Armin would carry the trauma of that night for the rest of their lives. The events of that early morning showed how quickly ordinary moments can unravel into tragedy. A simple invitation at a gas station, a party among friends, a few careless jokes. None of them seemed dangerous at the time. Yet those moments collided with Robinson's hidden turmoil, unleashing devastation. For investigators, the case was about piecing together fragments: grainy camera footage, hurried phone calls to 911, whispered details from survivors. For the families, it was about learning how their children's lives had ended in such a senseless way. In the days after the shooting, grief spread far beyond Devonshire Road. Families who once dreamed of their children's futures were suddenly planning funerals. At Paris Cameron's service, friends remembered her as bold and unapologetic, a young woman who brought light into every room. Her family, still in shock, spoke of a future stolen too soon. Timothy Miami Blanchard's farewell was filled with the same heartbreak. His brother shared memories of their bond, while friends described him as warm, fun-loving, and the kind of person who made everyone feel at ease. For Alante Davis, the stories were of laughter and playfulness. His sister said he was always the one to cheer her up, while friends called him the glue of their circle. Each goodbye carried the same truth: 3 young lives taken far too soon, left a void that words could never fill. The loss of Paris, Timothy, and Alante sent shockwaves through Detroit's LGBTQ community. Vigils filled the nights with candles and prayers, honoring their lives while also shining a light on the violence that LGBTQ people, especially transgender women of color, face far too often. Advocates called for change, stressing that this was not an isolated tragedy but part of a painful pattern rooted in stigma and hate. Leaders promised more support, but for families and survivors, the grief remained raw. Each year, their names are spoken at vigils: Paris for her courage to live openly, Timothy for his warmth and kindness, and Alante for the humor that held his circle of friends together. Remembering them keeps their stories alive beyond the tragedy. Their deaths stand as a reminder of how fragile safety can be and how dangerous silence, shame, and prejudice remain. 3 young friends sought joy that night. Instead, they became symbols of lives stolen by hate. One night was all it took to change everything. For Chicken Dondeda, a 33-year-old rapper from the Bronx and father of 4, the spotlight suddenly shifted from his music and jokes to a tragedy that would shake his community. A day earlier, a video surfaced showing him in a heated fight with local rapper Baby Threat. The clip spread fast, stirring up tension and debate online. By the next evening, his life would be cut short in front of the place he worked. Outside a smoke shop on Westchester Avenue, security cameras recorded his last moments. He stood with a friend, unaware of what was about to happen. In the footage, that friend casually wipes his nose and walks away, just seconds before a masked gunman runs up. One shot to the head, point blank. The rapper collapses and the shooter disappears into the night. Almost immediately, the video sparked questions. Was this payback for the fight with Baby Threat? Or had he been set up by someone he trusted? In the Bronx, rumors spread quickly, but answers are slow to come. What's certain is that a father, an artist, and a familiar face in his neighborhood was gone. Chicken Don Dada was more than a stage name, it was a persona that carried both the highs and lows of life in the Bronx. At just 33 years old, he was a father of 4, and his children were at the center of everything he did. Music was his outlet. Online, he posted clips that showed his personality, sometimes laughing, sometimes rapping with raw energy. His lyrics reflected the streets around him, often hinting at the violence and struggles he witnessed. One chilling line about being taken out with a single shot now feels less like entertainment and more like a warning that his own life was on borrowed time. Outside of music, he worked at a local smoke shop on Westchester Avenue. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him a way to take care of his family. Balancing fatherhood, work, and rap was never easy, yet he managed to keep pushing forward. That drive earned him respect, but it also put him in the same world where rivalries and grudges could quickly turn dangerous. The turning point came with his encounter with Baby Threat, a rising female rapper. Known for her tough image and connections, she wasn't someone easily intimidated. When a video surfaced of Don Dada striking her during an altercation, it spread rapidly, drawing criticism and anger. For many, it was a bad look that could only end one way. Less than 24 hours later, he was gone. Whether the fight directly caused the events that followed or simply lit a fuse that was already burning, no one can say for sure. It was August 7, 2025, at around 10:30 p.m. when everything unfolded. The spot was Westchester Avenue in Soundview, Bronx, underneath the rumbling tracks of the number 6 train. Just outside Exotic World, a small smoke shop where Don Dada worked, a surveillance camera recorded what would be his last moments. In the footage, he's seen standing with a friend, casually talking. Nothing about the scene looks unusual, until the friend briefly wipes his nose, then slowly walks away. Only seconds later, a masked figure rushes in. Without warning, the gunman pulls a weapon and fires a single shot to Don Dada's head. The rapper collapses instantly. The shooter runs off, disappearing into the night before anyone can react. Police and emergency crews arrived quickly. Don Dada was rushed to Jacoby Hospital, but doctors couldn't save him. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. From the start, investigators treated the case as a targeted attack. It wasn't random, someone came specifically for him. But the questions piled up almost immediately. Online, the video spread across social media. Internet sleuths zoomed in on every frame. Why did the friend wipe his nose? Why did he leave just moments before the Was it an innocent gesture or a signal? At the same time, many tied the killing back to Don Dada's public fight with Baby Threat. The video of him hitting her had gone viral just a day earlier. To some, the timing was too close to ignore, it looked like payback. Others believed the shooter might have been connected to street politics, grudges, or even people within Don Dada's own circle. Despite the speculation, police released very little. No suspects were named, no arrests made. The only public statement confirmed it was being investigated as a homicide. That silence fueled more theories, leaving family, friends, and fans desperate for answers. What remains certain is this: the attack was swift, precise, and planned. Whether it was a direct consequence of the Baby Threat altercation or a deeper betrayal, the truth is still hidden in shadows. Every detail of the footage is studied, but so far, it has only raised more questions than it has solved. The news of Chicken Don Dada's death spread quickly through Soundview. By the next morning, the corner outside Exotic World had transformed into a memorial. Candles lined the sidewalk, photos of him were taped to the shop's window, and flowers rested against the wall. Neighbors who had watched him grow up stood shoulder to shoulder with his friends and family, shaken by the sudden loss. At his funeral, the grief was heavy, but so were the stories that painted a full picture of who he was. Mourners remembered his humor, his generosity, and his drive to do better for his kids. One friend summed it up with a simple memory: if there was a kid right here, he'd buy them an ice cream. That's who he was. Others spoke about his music, his belief that one day his songs would be his ticket out of the streets. But alongside the tears, there was frustration. Some whispered that his death was the price of crossing a line when he hit Baby Threat. Others felt sure it was a betrayal from someone close to him, pointing again to the friend in the video who walked away seconds before the gun appeared. The surveillance footage became more than evidence. It became a ghost replaying over and over on people's phones, deepening the pain with every view. For his children, the loss was beyond words. 4 young lives left without their father, forced to grow up with memories instead of guidance. On social media, his small but loyal fan base poured out tributes. Posts were filled with heartbreak, anger, and calls for justice. For the Bronx, Chicken Don Dada's death was another painful reminder of how quickly life can be taken. At his vigil, candles and prayers carried the same questions. Was it revenge, betrayal, or something deeper? To fans he was a rapper chasing his dream, to his kids he was simply dad, and to his block he was a familiar face with a big laugh. But the mystery remains. Was his fight with Baby Threat to blame, or did someone close set him up? Police called it a targeted killing, yet no arrests have been made. For many, the tragedy feels chilling. Don Dada often rapped about dying young, and in the end, his fate echoed his lyrics. Now his children and community carry his name forward, waiting for justice that still hasn't come. Take care, stay alert, and we'll see you in the next video.